afternoon, everybody. We actually have a little sound system here, and it does work. So I would invite you to find a place to sit or stand and come and join our little ceremony this afternoon.
So, how are you?
You're timeless. You never change. You're having a good time?
Sure.
It's worth the wait.
Well,
What a beautiful weekend. What a beautiful day we have for this event. So different than what it was last Sunday. So it is wonderful to have everybody here with us. You'll notice that the program will be somewhat different because the program was actually planned for last Sunday, and because this is a holiday weekend and because people had other commitments for this weekend, some of the people who would have been on the program and been present here were not able to come. But we are happy that all of you have come. So welcome to the 125th anniversary celebration of the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford, and a time to honor some women who walked from the Oxford Center, otherwise known as Huguenot Square. They walked up here every year, year in and year out, and had a picnic lunch and turned around and went back down. Some of the time we're told that they did have a ride up here, but most of the time they walked on some beautiful day in late August or early September. So we have come to honor those women as well. As I said, there will be some changes in the program, and the first change is right in the beginning. The Naval Junior ROTC was going to come for a color guard presentation, but they were not able to come this weekend. But at this time, I invite you to rise and to join Jane Banya and Carol Butler, who will lead us in the national anthem.
oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, those bright stars and bright stars through the perilous fight. For the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets played where were bombs bursting in air, gave through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you very much. And at this time, and we can stay seated for this if you are already seated, let us take a moment to remember the Huguenots. They were the people who came here in search of a place where they could worship as they believed. So let's just take a moment to really think about the French Huguenots who settled this town. Thank you. The Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford was formed in June of 1881. It was actually organized by a few women who were determined that the memory of the Huguenots would stay alive in this town, in this community, and in this state. There is the National Huguenot Society. We are not Huguenots. That a Huguenot would belong to the National Huguenot Society, but we are the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford. The membership in this society is open to everyone. I don't think there are any members of this society anymore who are Huguenots, but it was started by the Huguenots. And it was started in order to do things like this and to enjoy this beautiful spot. This is such a beautiful area, and it is kept up very well. So if you would like to join the Huguenot Memorial Society, Mrs. Barry has some membership application forms over here with some information in writing about the society. So please consider becoming a member. We will have a semi-annual meeting December 2nd, and all members are invited. And if you are here and would like to come and then decide if you wanted to be a member, you're welcome to do that also. So see one of us afterwards and we'll give you some more information on it. In June of 1881, the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford was formed, and they had their first meeting. At their meeting, they had their first president speak. Now, this was an organization that was formed by a few women, and their first president was the Honorable Zachariah Allen. Zachariah Allen left us his handwritten copy of his speech, many pages long. But at this time, Selectman John Sadd is going to give a recreated, revised, rewritten, and very much shortened speech that was originally somewhere part of Zachariah Allen's speech. John, would you come forward? You might not need this.
Thank you, Jean. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I guess Jean summed it up. When she told me that the speech was quite lengthy, I started having second thoughts and thought maybe I was going to be at the Cape this week, or maybe I was going leaf peeping, but then she told me it was going to be revised, and she put a lot of effort into it to bring it down a bit. And she also made it more politically correct. From what my understanding is from Jean is that there were some harsh words said about the Indians and about the Puritans at that time. So it was quite interesting to hear how we've evolved over the years as a society. And it's with great pleasure that I'm here this afternoon to recreate a portion of that speech that was given by the Honorable Zachariah Allen of Providence. And it goes as follows. In all the territory of the county of Worcester in 1687, there were but a few scattered settlements until the close of the war between France and England with the Treaty of 1713. Previous to this time, plantations had been granted in Lancaster in 1643, in Mendon in 1660, and in Oxford and Woodstock, which commenced in 1686. Only Woodstock remained, as a few settlers could be persuaded to remove to any of them until after the peace treaty of 1713. A few blockhouses dotted the principal points on the old bay path between Boston and Springfield, when the treaty French Huguenot families exiled for their faith ventured into the wilderness to settle in New Oxford Village. The country outside the old established center of colonization in Boston was in fact a wilderness. The trail with its dangers and sufferings that attended in it were actual and countless. Even under adverse circumstances, Gabriel Brennan, a very wealthy Huguenot who was living in London for a time, expanded much of his own wealth toward the benefit of this country in building ships, making nails, promoting the manufacture of resin, hats, and other goods. The goods sent to Newport, Rhode Island, and Boston from the New Oxford Village were probably the first goods manufactured in Worcester County. As a condition of acquiring this grant from the English, Vernon agreed to build a corn or grist mill, wash leather mill, and a sawmill. In addition, a chapel, or temple as it was called, was constructed. Considerable wrangling among those originally connected to this grant continued for many years as Brennan and the families of settlers under him were deprived of a legal title to their land and improvements. Without a legal title, they could not eject trespassers lawfully. This injustice disheartened the settlers, and after waiting in vain for their deeds, they began to consider deserting the mills and the improvements they made to the village. The first colony flourished and then became extinct in 1696 with the death of members of the Jensen family by someone who had been supplied with rum without limit. 2 years earlier, one member of the Arlett family was killed and 2 children disappeared. After 10 Huguenot families returned in 1699 and stayed until 1704 before abandoning the village back to the English, who came here in 1713. Some Huguenot families did not return at that time. In regards to this location of the fort, it may be said that the location of this village in relation to the Bay Colony and the settlement around Fort Hill in relation to Oxford was in some respect a strategic one. The Old Bay Path and the Connecticut Path allowed for travel through this area. Around the fort itself, the ground fell rapidly to the north and to the west. The locality being this well chosen, it is easy to see that the fort was planned, not for an immediate emergency, but for the permanent protection of a growing and active settlement of 30 families with their flocks and herds. In 1846, I visited the fort, took measurements, and made a sketch of its form and condition. The southwest bastion still existed and was clearly defined by its walls. The south wall was also in somewhat dilapidated condition and had disappeared, as had the well. The northeast bastion was overgrown with grass, and the rest of the walls had been razed to their foundation stones. A monstrous and wide-spreading mound of refuge stone had buried from memory as well as from sight all traces of the building within. The walls of the old fort have been mostly overthrown in this ruthless spirit of modern improvements in our country. The materials have been used in the construction of the stone walls that now enclose the lot in which the ruins are situated. Sufficient, however, remains of the foundation stones and portions of the walls to indicate to the eye of a visitor the military design of the only remaining fortification of masonry in Massachusetts. It serves to perpetuate the memory of the Huguenots of 1687. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And it is a much shorter Frost who is with us, and we are delighted to have him with us this afternoon.
If you want to use this, just push that in.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. It's obviously a much nicer day than last week, and to come over here and to have homemade fried chicken, that was just terrific. We gotta do this again next year. Can we just do it every year, just for the heck of it? 126th. But this was a great event, and I want to congratulate the members of this society for all their dedication and hard work to make sure that all citizens in the town of Oxford and throughout Massachusetts and even in this great country realize that that each community has a rich history, that Oxford has a rich history, and that even though we know all about what happened with Plymouth, and we got Plymouth Plantation, and we know what the Pilgrims did and why they came here, but I think it's important even here at the local level that we discuss and and talk about how they were similar individuals who were escaping the same type of religious persecution and were looking for freedom and to control their own destiny. That's the reason they came here to Oxford on this beautiful, gorgeous hill. And, they picked a great spot. It's beautiful. But at the same time, I'm sure through the years that they were here, being New England weather, and we all know what it's like, it's going to be harsh at times too. And they weren't, right next door to civilization either. So for them to come out here and to tackle those challenges tells you how passionately they believed they wanted a fresh start, how passionately they believed they needed to come out here to escape religious persecution, that they're willing to take on the challenges of going out in the middle of the woods, up on a hill, out in the middle probably of nowhere back then. So I think it's so important. Again, I congratulate everybody. I congratulate the entire society, any member of the society over the past 125 years that have kept this history alive, to keep this in front of people, to keep it in their minds, to let them know that this happened, that people came here, that they built settlements here, and that there's still a fort here, and that there's still a memorial here to recognize them. And it's important for the history of Oxford. It's important for the history of central Massachusetts. And so it's an honor to be here today, and I thank everybody for their great efforts. I know my fellow selectmen, fellow colleagues that represent the town of Oxford are here and working very hard to make sure that the history of Oxford is preserved, and I appreciate them being here as well. And I have a citation from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the House of Representatives. Be it hereby known to all that the Massachusetts House of Representatives offers sincerest congratulations to the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford in recognition of the joyous occasion of celebrating its 125th anniversary. The entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all endeavors. Given this first day of October in the year 2006, it is signed by the Speaker, Salvatore De Macy. It is offered by State Representative Paul Kajowski, State Representative Mark Karen, and by me, State Representative Paul Frost. Congratulations and God bless.
Accept it. Thank you very much, Representative.
Well, thank you. Congratulations.
On behalf of the society, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Dottie Barry, for accepting the proclamation on behalf of the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford. At this time, I would like to say that Senator Moore had planned to be here last Sunday, but he had a commitment which prevents him from being with us today. However, he sent us a letter, and at this time, I would like to ask Russell Rowe to come forward and read his greetings.
Thank you.
Push the button.
Thank you, Gene.
You have to hold the button.
Hold the button. Any of you who know Senator Moore know about his love of history, especially local history, his knowledge of history, and I'm sure he would have loved to have been here if he could, but he did send along these words to Gene O'Reilly and to the Oxford Historical Commission and to the Huguenot Society. It says, "I regret that I am out of state this weekend and therefore unable to attend the festivities honoring Oxford's Huguenot pioneers. The early Huguenot settlers endured many of the trials and tribulations suffered by our Pilgrim and Puritan forefathers. The degree of persecution that the Huguenots experienced at the hands of the French monarchy and clergy clearly constituted what today the media calls ethnic cleansing or religious war. You know, it's those darn horseless carriages all the time. Noisy, noisy, noisy. The Huguenots who settled in Oxford demonstrated great faith and courage as they settled in what was less than a friendly region. Nevertheless, they prevailed in their goal of attaining religious freedom and became an important part of the history of Oxford and of America. The Historical Commission and the people of Oxford should be commended for their effort to remember the sacrifices of our early settlers who helped to build a strong and vibrant community. We can all learn a great deal from the tremendous example that Oxford's Huguenots provide to this and future generations. And it's signed Senator Richard T. Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Russ. And I do have to say, Senator Moore, I just don't know how he does all he does and how he arrives at all the events that he does attend. So he was very disappointed that he was unable to be with us today because he is interested in the history and the history of this town in particular. So thank you for standing in for him. At this time, I would like to introduce Selectman Daniel Coonan, who has come with a proclamation, I believe, for the Huguenot Memorial Society members.
Thank you, Jean. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen in the town of Oxford, as well as the town manager, we're here today not only, first of all, to thank the great members of this historical society and our commission that has really taken this as their key pet project, as a key project to the town of Oxford, to the community, and the rich history that we have here today. And also to the volunteers, not only in the society, but also our local Boy Scouts, the local endeavors, the local people in town that recognize this, that recognize what the Huguenots stand for Oxford's rich history, a history that we're all very, very proud of. So with that, I would like to read this proclamation. Whereas the Oxford Board of Selectmen take this opportunity upon the 50th commemoration of the annual walk and picnic at the Huguenot Fort to recognize the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford and honor them upon their 125th anniversary. And whereas, on the 4th day of October, 1881, the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford was duly established under the laws of the Commonwealth as a corporation for the object of perpetuating by all appropriate means the memory of the early Huguenot settlers of Oxford. And whereas, the society was formed by a few women who were determined that the Huguenots would be remembered as they were their very few descendants who remained in the area. It is distinguished from the National Huguenot Society, which is limited solely to those who can prove that they are Huguenots. And whereas it is most appropriate that we honor the society at an event at the Huguenot Fort, which is thought to be the oldest stone fort in the state of Massachusetts and Oxford's most historic site. The society, in cooperation with the Oxford Historical Commission, has organized work sessions at the fort over the years, and has worked very hard to keep the last remaining evidence of the French Huguenot settlement looking good. And whereas, the society was also responsible for the granite obelisk monument to commemorate the Huguenots, which was donated by them and their descendants of the Huguenots and dedicated on October 2nd, 1884. In 1979, the society built an altar for Easter sunrise services, which has been held here for many years. In 1985, they urged the legislature to designate the bridge on Huguenot Road as the Huguenot Fort Bridge. In 1986, they organized the rededication of Huguenot Square, and they erected signs that provide information about the fort to the public. And whereas, for many years, the society has sponsored an essay contest about the Huguenots for 7th grade students at the Oxford Middle School, with generous prizes of $100, $75, and $50. They also donated $5,000 to the Oxford Free Public Library when the addition was built in the recent past. Therefore, let it be resolved that we, the Oxford Board of Selectmen of the town of Oxford, do hereby proclaim October 1st, 2006, Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford Day. This given under our hands this 26th day of September, 2006. Hereby signed Chairman Jenny L. Casey, Vice Chairman Henry L. LaMountain Sr., Secretary Daniel P. Coonan, Susan M. Gallant, Member John G. Saad, as well as Town Manager Dennis A. Power. With that, we thank the society, and we thank all those that came out on this gorgeous Sunday afternoon to look at the true history of Oxford and remember the perseverance that was established by our great founders. Thank you.
At this time, I would invite Mr. Coonan to present the proclamation to Mrs. May White, who we're asking to accept the proclamation on behalf of the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford. May?
Don't have to get up, I can sit down. Thank you. Here you go.
Thank you very much. And at this time, let's identify some of the Huguenot Memorial Society members. Nobody has to get up, but just kind of give us a wave so we'll know who you are and where you are. I think the Walkers are members. Russ Bro, Martha, Roger, Paul, Sam. Thank you so much. At this time, we were expecting to have Mr. Eric Roth with us. He is director of Historic Huguenot Street in New Paltz, New York. I don't believe he has arrived. He was all set to come for last Sunday, but he wasn't sure about this Sunday, and I think we now know the answer. Unfortunately, he's not here, but Historic Huguenot Street is a Huguenot settlement. It's a Huguenot village in New Paltz, New York. We have sometimes spoken about having a bus trip to New Paltz, New York, and that's something that we're looking forward to do sometime in the future. So at this time, I would like to introduce the women who walked to the fort. They walked from the intersection of Holbrook Road and Huguenot and Fort Hill. They represent the women who did indeed, many, many years ago, walk to the fort. Courtney Rowe is the first person that I would like to introduce, but I know she has had to leave. And she represented Ada Jocelyn. Now, Ada Jocelyn was Dr. Elia P. Jocelyn's sister. A very feisty lady, as the description goes, but a very gifted poet. And she has a booklet of poetry that was published. She was very active in town affairs and very interested in the town. The other person is Jeanette Smith. And Jeanette Smith represents Miss Josie Tyler. Josie Tyler taught first grade at Jocelyn School, and then she became principal. Josie Tyler was the daughter of the last Universalist minister in Oxford, Reverend Albert Tyler. So her roots run very deep in Oxford. And Jeanette Smith represented her. Where's Jeanette? There she is, right back there. Carol Butler. Carol Butler represents Miss Georgiana Wheelock. Georgiana Wheelock is from the Wheelock family. Her father was a broker in Boston, but he came here to become a farmer. And they lived in Oxford. She taught school in Oxford, and up until her 90s was very active and thoroughly enjoyed visiting with her friend Miss Josie Tyler. She passed away at age 101. Irene Elaine represents Miss Helen Greenwood. Helen Greenwood taught for 2 years in Oxford because in those days, if you wanted to teach in Worcester, you had to teach in the country first. So she had to teach 2 years in Oxford, but you know, she didn't live in Oxford, but I think once she came here, she never really left, even though she taught in Worcester for, I believe, 42 years. She was a secondary teacher. She taught English and botany, I believe. Very, very gifted. A very gifted artist. Did a lot of photography. And she has left us with some wonderful photographs of how Oxford used to look. Abby Rowe represented the children of Oxford, who were taught by these three teachers. So we have the four people. We have Ada Jocelyn, Josie Tyler, Georgiana Wheelock, and Helen Greenwood. Thank you all very much for representing these wonderful, wonderful ladies. There was a wonderful committee that has put this event together. We had several meetings during the summertime, and it was a wonderful committee because no matter what idea came up, there was somebody who said, well, I could do that, or we could do this, or how about doing it a little bit differently, but we could still take that basic idea. It was a committee where everybody had some input. There were about 20 people who worked on this. So thank you all very much. I am doing this part of it, but I can tell you that every committee member did something. Thank you very much. Sometimes we wonder, who were the Huguenots? How did they come here? Well, we've heard the story. We've heard the story about the fort. We've heard the story about the beginning of the settlement. But I'd just like to say a couple of words about the Huguenots themselves. In many cases, they were pretty well educated. The Huguenots who came here were fairly wealthy, and they were pretty well educated. They came here to live. They came here to settle, and they came here to stay. However, fate did not allow that. They didn't stay that long. They stayed a total of about 14 years. But they came here with their boxes of plant material from their native France. They came here with their grapevines. They came here with their herbs, seeds, and roots and cuttings. They came here with the ability to have plum trees and peach trees, to plant currants, gooseberries, asparagus. They came here to put their roots down and to stay here. They were a wonderful, industrious group. When we look at what they did in the short time that they were here, it is truly amazing. They built a church. They built a sawmill, a wash leather mill, because the French Huguenots pretty much were the only people who knew the process that went into taking the pelts and making them into gloves and hat making. And then those products were shipped down to Gabriel Bernon in Newport. But they were very industrious, and they did so many different things. They actually built this fort as well, and they built the fort, sometimes we say for protection, but in this case, in those days when you came into the wilderness, the thing to do seemed to be to build a fort. There was a lot of peace here initially, and yet the Huguenots still built a fort. We know that in 1694, several families probably lived in the fort because there was some unrest in the area. And we're pretty sure that they were families living in the fort because there was pottery and there were items that had been retrieved in archaeological digs that would indicate that families lived here and they cooked what they needed to eat in the fireplaces in the fort. Each man in the Huguenot family was given 50 to 100 acres, and it depended upon the size of his family as to how much acreage he was given. But he was given this land, and this is where they planned, as I said, to settle. So they built their houses, they built their mills, they built their church, and yet they abandoned the settlement in 1704. It was just no longer safe, they believed, for them to stay here. Now, some of the Huguenot families did come back to Oxford. You'll recognize some of their names, some of the street names. At this time, there were so many people to thank for keeping this site what it is today. It's about 8.5 acres, and in the 1870s, the few women who formed the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford urged a few men to make some purchases. One of the men was George Sigourney, you know Sigourney Street in Oxford, and his cousin Sigourney Butler, and William D. Ely, who was the son-in-law of the gentleman whose speech John Sad read. Each of them purchased some of this property, and they in turn deeded it over to the Huguenot Memorial Society of Oxford for safekeeping. So they took their own money, and there is no evidence of any money changing hands from the society because the women had formed the society, and my guess is they didn't have the money, but the men did. So the men purchased the land, deeded it to the society, and here we are today on town property. At this time, we can say that in, I believe it was 1979, that the Huguenot Memorial Society deeded the land to the town of Oxford. Shortly after, it was put on the National Register of Historic Places. And then shortly after that, there was a preservation restriction, which prevents development of the property placed on it as well. So we're grateful to the society for our predecessors for deeding this land to the town. We're grateful to the early society members who took the stones that the farmers in the area had thrown into the fort to get rid of them. As they cleared this land, they threw stones over the wall inside the fort, and they began to pile up year in and year out. So when the Huguenot Society, Memorial Society was formed, they wanted the stones out of the historic Huguenot fort. They came out. And if you look at the monument, you'll notice that it's up on a knoll. That's the pile of stones that came from inside the fort. Now that's not the wall stones of the fort, but those were the field stones that the farmers had put in there to clear their fields, and they needed to come out. So they put them in a pile in the middle of the field, and then when the society wanted to put a monument up there, they chose that site. So they put some soil on top of it and placed the foundation for the monument on top of all that. So we have the monument on the mound in the middle of the field. We're grateful to the people who conducted an archaeological dig in 1880. In 1880, they did a lot. We're grateful for the mapping that was done in 1920. The brochure that you have has some reference to the fort and the placement of different items that were in the fort. We're grateful to the archaeological dig for the archaeological dig that was done about 20 years ago, at which time this whole area was very well documented. And at this time it's declared that there needs to be no further archaeological digging because all the documentation that they have, that they need, they actually have. We're grateful to Lorenzo Bilodeau and to George Hast for constructing the altar that you see to the back of the lot. You can see it right over to the right. They built that, and it was dedicated in October of 1980. We're grateful to the neighbors around the fort who have joined us for our work sessions. We've had a couple of sessions, usually in November, and we chose November in the beginning because this place was just covered with poison ivy. And it was covered with brush right behind you along the street and over to the right and in front of the fort itself. It was all brush. It was all voluntary growth that didn't belong there. The neighbors came and they helped us cut the brush. We cut and cut and cut. And at different times, a couple of Boy Scouts have come and organized some work sessions. Timothy Heselton and Michael Murphy have each earned their Eagle Scout Awards by gathering people together, some of their parents and other Boy Scouts and some of their family members. Some sisters were involved also, and they cut brush. So a lot of work has been done up here, and we thank everybody for having done it. At this time, I am going to read the names of the people who have worked here. Christopher Freehart, Christopher Cherry, Christopher Rowe, Justin Kelly, Joseph Mazzaro, Josh Weibley, Yomaj Shepard, Jonathan Perdue, Rayanne Richards, Mitchell Gage, Joseph Malone, Kevin Armstrong, Andrew Tate, Joseph Rowe, Christine Murphy, Charles Murphy, Roger Lavoie, Mr. James Walker, who coordinated the work with the Scouts also, Ben Domi, Josh Escobar, Jared Kennan, Colin Malone, Alex Macbeth, Nick Murray, Ryan Simoneau, Daniel Skibos, and some leaders in charge, Ron Simoneau, Thomas Skibos, David Escobar, Don Malone, John Kelly, Ron Rowe, and one of the Rowe family members who was over here as an exchange student from Germany also. Now, we are using two different lists that were given to us. If there are any scouts that you know of whose names were not mentioned, I would appreciate it if you would let us know, let Mrs. Rowe know, or let me know, and we will see to it that they are given certificates. At this time, I'm not sure that any of these people are present. Is anyone present? Anybody whose name I mentioned? Okay, at this time, what we will do is to give the certificates of appreciation, which we have for each of those children and adults. We will give them to the scout leader, and then they can distribute them from there, because each of those people mentioned has a certificate of appreciation that we would like to give to them. We also have certificates of appreciation for some other people. One is Mrs. Judy Hodgeny, and Judy has coordinated the essay contest for the Huguenot Memorial Society for many, many years. She does a tremendous job doing that, and then the students from the 7th grade earn prize money from that. We have a certificate that will also go to her. We are grateful to the businesses in town who have sold the t-shirts for the Huguenot Memorial Society. We have some pens that can be purchased, and we have some pins that can be purchased as well. We also have a certificate of appreciation for Herb Reinhardt and George Hoare, because they actually worked together to build the sign that is down behind me, and they put it in place identifying this historic site. And at this time, we are ending our program, but we need to end it on a very positive and a very solemn note, because it is a very special place. While the Huguenots came here for the freedom to worship, they found peace initially. And this was a place of peace for them. So we hope that it will be a place of peace for each of us all through the years. So I would invite you to stand at this time, and we will join hands. We're going to close the program by singing "Let There Be Peace on Earth." And I would invite Carol Butler and Jane Banya to once again lead us in song.
Peace on earth, the peace that was meant to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
I am not a singer. My son is the singer, and he was supposed to be here today. So let there be peace.